Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this very final talk. It's the final talent talk at the UK Film Centre. I want to give a big shout out to Sylvia, who programs all these 12 amazing talks, and for doing such a great job. Let's give her a round of applause. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I'm a journalist and festival programmer. I'll be moderating today, and I'm so excited because I love this film. It absolutely floored the audience last night, and it might also be the first time anybody in a GIMP mask was allowed in the Palais. Unofficial stat for you. But let's first introduce ourselves. My name is Wendy Mitchell. I am a white woman with bags under her eyes because it's day 52 of Cannes. I'm wearing spectacles. I have a blue and white dress on. And then we have the writer-director, Harry Lighton.
Hi, I'm Harry Lighton. I am a 6-foot white male with a slightly receding hairline.
Okay. And
Slightly.
then Lee Groombridge, producer.
I'm Lee Groombridge, and I'm a small, middle-aged white man with spectacles, green trousers, and a cream shirt.
Great. And Gareth Scales, who's the editor.
I'm Gareth Scales. I'm a 6'3" middle-aged man
Wow.
with red hair.
I'm really feeling short now, by the way. Huge congrats on this film. Also, before we continue, I just want to shout out their Element Pictures was also involved in this film. Emma, Ed, Andrew are your fellow producers. So they're not on stage with us, but very much help make the film happen. Harry, we have to start with you. You had made some very successful shorts, and then I believe it was Eva Yates at BBC sent you this novella, this book, which is called Box Hill by Adam Mars-Jones. Did you think, Eva, do you know me? Or why would you send me this topic? You know, what did you think when you first got that book?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it sort of maybe said something about Eva's idea of me, that she sent me like the sort of filthiest book I'd ever read. But to be fair to her, you know, my first short film was about a pair of brothers going to a glory hole in Hastings, so it wasn't like a million miles away from Pillion. And I read the book, and I remember finding it like funny firstly, and also like bracing and kind of challenging, and knowing that there was like lots about it which I thought was sort of intimidating as a prospect to adapt into a film. But
You like a challenge, I guess.
I like a challenge, and also I, you know, immediately spoke to Emma Norton at Element about it, and she similarly was like, it sort of scares me, but let's see how far we can take this challenge, and if it hits a roadblock, it hits a roadblock. Yeah. So yeah, I sat down with the novelist, and Adam Mars-Jones, you know, kindly said like, you can do whatever you want with it, and that was kind of a condition of me wanting to adapt it, even though I love the novel, but it was very different from the film I wanted to make. Yeah.
So before we go further, we're not going to spoil much of this film, I promise, because it's hard to get tickets here. Who in the room has seen it? Oh, okay, quite a few people, so that's good. Eric, can you tell us, like, what the film you wanted to make, and how that differs from the book, what you could bring in of yourself into what we now see on screen?
Yeah, I think that firstly, the novel's set in the. I mean, a sort of short summation of the film. If you haven't seen it at all, I mean, I guess everyone kind of knows what it's about, but it's about like a kind of social, romantic, professional loser who gets picked up by like the world's hottest biker and turned into his submissive, and goes on a journey. and I knew that I wanted. The book is set in the 1970s, and the Dom biker played by Alexander Skarsgård is like a enigmatic figure, and I found that like that enigma in the 70s was less interesting to me, because there are kind of obvious explanations for maybe why a gay guy might hide his identity in the 70s, and I was more interested in the idea that maybe withholding information was part of a power dynamic rather than a reaction to kind of social oppression. And so that was one of the big changes. And then I also like, the book is funny, certainly, but I think it,
But your film is really funny.
No, that's not what I mean. The sexual dynamic is harsher in the novel and kind of more unbending, and it's pretty harsh and pretty unbending in the film. But I knew that I wanted to try and find a sort of balance between brutality and tenderness in the relationship, which perhaps was less present in the book.
Okay. A big welcome to Nick Morris, who's the DOP. That's not just some random guy who saw a free seat. Thank you, Nick, for joining us, and congrats on the film.
Very sorry I'm late, everybody.
Okay, and we'll come to you in a minute. So get to catch your breath. You made it. Why was it so important to follow more of Colin's POV? Colin is the sort of suburban, slightly awkward but lovable guy, not the hot biker guy. Yeah.
I think because, well, firstly, the hot biker guy is a fairly static character. He remains a hot biker guy for most of the film, and Colin's journey is the like very extreme one from kind of like ignorance to experience. And I also think that like what I did like about the novel was there's a kind of rose-tinted perspective to the narration where these events, which perhaps from a like conventional perspective might be seen as confronting or like traumatic, Colin processes in a very like like as if he's like living a teen movie, and I thought that was a really interesting kind of tone to try and inject into the visual perspective of the film as well as the like plot.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask you one more and then give you a break. But I really love, and I think this is very different than the book, Colin's family, his mum and dad, are so supportive of him. They love that he's gay, I think. His mum is fixing him up on blind dates. You know, I think this is very different than the book when the guy was trying to hide his sexuality. But they would love for him to find a partner and settle down. And I think you'll see it when you see, if you haven't seen the film yet, that this film, you know, it's tricky sub and dom stuff, but it's got such warmth. And so why was that family at the heart of it also something you really wanted to make sure was there?
Well, I think I wanted the parents to be like extremely permissive at the start of the film, and like, you know, as you say, like literally pushing Colin towards gay men because you know, it's not that like homophobia isn't alive and well in the UK, but I in terms of like film narrative, I'm kind of a little tired of the same sort of tropes of homophobic parents, and I also thought that like a more interesting question was like, at what point do incredibly liberal-minded parents say, actually, no, this isn't right,
not for my son,
and
yeah.
You know, is that based on like a legitimate concern for the son's well-being, or is it based on them kind of superimposing their relationship model onto their son? I thought, you know, that was a kind of interesting question, and then the like warmth for the family. I think, you know, if you speak to, well, if you speak to anyone, but if you speak to anyone in the kink community, the kink aspects of their lives often exist alongside like very mundane lives, and like
they're still taking dad's dog for a walk.
Exactly, and you know,
have Christmas dinner.
Raise an anomaly in that perspective. And so I thought that like the contrast you could have going from an orgy to a like, as you say, like a dinner with your parents were like cinematically kind of interesting.
Lee, I'd love to come to you next just to talk a little bit about how this film was set up. I know we've got a lot of people here wondering how you get a debut feature made. Lee also worked on Bird, Andrea Arnold's amazing film that was here last year. So Lee, can you talk a little bit about how it was structured and which partners came on board when, and on paper, I think this is quite a scary film. I mean, you absolutely have a huge standing ovation last night, and now it's a hit. But it is about tricky subject. Was anybody scared of it?
I mean, I come on to projects actually quite late,
Okay.
so all the credit for kind of pulling the finance and the partners together is
That's more
Emma,
element.
yeah, and Ed and Andrew.
Okay.
But when I came on, I think everyone was fully supportive of the film
Okay.
that Harry wanted to make. And yeah, that's that really.
And remind me of the partners, the BFI,
So it's
Film
BFI,
Fund,
BBC are here. Yeah, so it was developed with Eva Yates at the BBC, and then the BFI are here. Anna's here, I think. Louise is over there. Yeah, so then they came in and made it happen.
Yeah. I mean, Harry, for you, did you have to do... obviously, Eva sent you the book, but did you have to convince anyone at any point that this is the way I want to tell the story, and yes, there is going to be an orgy, and yes, this is important?
I don't think I had to convince anyone because, like, my
the
very
right.
first meeting with Emma about the book, I was like, I don't want to, approach this if I'm not going to approach it in a direct way. I think, like, it was very crucial to me that, like, in the presentation of the sex, it felt like both honest, and it didn't feel like as a like filmmaking team we were putting a judgment on the kind of sex. I wanted to leave it up to the audience to say, this turns me on, or I find it off-putting, not like, pan away to a tree when they're shagging and and do that.
Birds chirping in the background. Or how was it shooting in Bromley?
I actually grew up in Bromley,
Okay,
yeah.
there you
So,
go.
but I didn't tell Harry that.
Okay.
So, no, I didn't tell you until you landed on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. My granddad's also
So,
from Bromley.
and then, on these kind of smaller films, you have to kind of put as much money as you can on the screen, and we had a great little base, and then everything was, we minibus from that base, and all the locations were very, very close. I think we had a few standalone locations, like the countryside for the orgy scene was obviously a little bit further away, but ultimately it was all shot in and around
Great
Bromley.
British nature really on display
Yes.
in that. My goodness.
Yeah, and we did have a. What was great about the Christmas scene was the 20
Never
foot.
seen anything like this camping trip, let me tell you. It really... But did you, I know people who've shot sort of sensitive subject matter and maybe sort of lied to the local council or sort of fudged, saying it's a romance, or did you have to fudge anything for
At the
permits,
beginning,
or-
you have to give pages to location owners, and there was a slight concern, and we said we might get a few knockbacks from people, but actually we didn't.
Oh,
There
great.
wasn't- yeah.
Okay, people are more open-minded than I give them credit.
Well, the Ray's home was a lovely family, and the wife happened to be a huge Skarsgård fan, so she was like, "You can do what you want."
Well, yeah, let's... and how many shooting days, Lee?
28.
Okay, and
Yes.
how many locations, do you know?
Too many.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. No.
How many shooting days did you want?
Look, as a
50, yeah.
producer, you always want to, you want the best talent and as many shoot days as you can get, and that really was that. We pushed it to the maximum, and I think we had a 25-day schedule at the beginning, and then we managed to squeeze it a little bit more.
Okay. Let's jump down to Nick. Welcome again. And Nick, can you tell us, did you and Harry have sort of references that you looked at, like paintings or photographs or other films that might reference how Pillion could look?
Yeah, I think I like to bring references to the table, but Harry had like a really great pool of reference initially when we first started talking about it. A lot of it's photography, like Nick Waplington was a big reference for a lot of the interior spaces. Does some incredible photographs of like families, which are a great reference point for like the Smith home and everything at Christmas and the kind of chaos that happens in that. And then there's like another photographer, Tim, I need to check his surname, but who made a beautiful book called Love Bites, which is like quite a stark, different kind of, like differently composed vision of Britain. And I think that was played really interestingly into Ray's house because that had a different tone. It's like very important for us that we wanted to like create a real sense of warmth and the real sense of home, and then something that was very stark and very like unlived in
It's
Ray's
like
house.
all IKEA in one book. You know?
Yeah.
It is not somewhere you want to sell in.
I think that's something that's been so interesting across the whole process, is that Harry was so keen for like none of us to necessarily really know very much about Ray, and that he has just transplanted, and he's so enigmatic. And I think that means there's so much nuance that Alex managed to put into the character because there's so much grey area. And that comes down to the production design from what Fran did, which is amazing. And that comes down into our like subtleties of the lighting choices and stuff too.
Yeah. And how did you shoot the motorcycling bits? And if you want to all chime in, or how did you logistically shoot them? How did you rig that? How did you want the motorcycle bits to look?
I mean, I guess there's sort of three main approaches to motorcycles in it. There's like, I suppose hopefully the most impactful or some of the most interesting bits are some of the very slow motion stuff that happens when we first rise to Ray and then when they go on their rides later. And we actually did that with the bike static because it's just that sensation of passing lights. So we had a rig that just moves the lights around over the top of them, and we had lots of blacks around them. Lots of people with fans, some little spritzers, that kind of thing. And just kind of meant that like shooting at 200 frames per second on an open road from one vehicle to another bike for what we were trying to achieve, which is actually something that's quite heightened and would kind of not really been possible. And I can't remember what the reference we saw was. We were like, we actually want them to be coming in and out of complete darkness, and the best way of doing that is to just do it that way.
Do it in the dark.
Yeah, just do it in the dark with some lights. And then otherwise we spent like a day, half a day, I can't really remember now, but tracking with the group of bikes as they went to go on the holiday. We had this like one camera car with like a little tiny camera pointing at the front and a bigger camera pointing at the back. And we drove pretty much all the way into Kent, into our beautiful like bucolic area, and like then came back at night and got some more of the other footage for that. And I guess the final way, I'm talking for a long time now, was just for when Colin steals Ray's bike. It's like a very different feeling to that. We wanted that to feel like dangerous and energetic. And so one of our nights, our last night, in fact, we had one little motorbike rig that would follow our stunt rider for the wider shots, and then we had a process trailer where you pull the motorbike, and we had like a little crane arm that we can move around and get different perspectives from that. And that was great fun. I think Harry had a great time being like dragged around Dagenham on the back of that.
And just when we come to the editing, I think the editing is also essential in this. Really, when you see the film, it's just amazing the kind of tones you can juggle within this. But obviously, you're not going to cut from the camping orgy to Sunday roast, with mom and dad. How did you manage some of the tonal jumps or shifts and make it all so coherent?
I think a huge part of it was Harry's script. I remember you saying to me that there's always a joke in every scene. And so even the funeral, he's talking about there's a side of bacon given to the happiest couple in this village. So there's always a lightness to every scene. So you always knew that no matter how dark we got, there would be a sense of light throughout, which was it was amazing.
I want to rewatch it already and look for that.
And then the other thing was that we always knew it was funny, but sometimes it just tipped into trying to be funny, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so we would pull back on some of the, not gags, but the jokes that were in the film, and just hold and be confident knowing that it was just funny. And it was never trying to be funny, it just was, which was great.
I've been very restrained. It's been up here 20 minutes, and I haven't yet asked about Alexander Skarsgård as the hot biker daddy. And then also the amazing Harry Melling as Colin. When I first saw the film, I thought, there's nobody else I can now imagine in these roles. Partly because I think Harry Melling gives Colin, he's not absolutely stupid. Like, he's maybe being slightly naive, or he's just going with it, but he's not an idiot. And I think that's partly down to Harry. I mean, also your script, of course. And then Alexander, he's mysterious, and you don't learn about him, but we know somewhere in there's some charm. So how did you cast them? Who came on first? Did you do chemistry sort of testing with them?
No, I knew I'd seen... when I wrote it, I didn't actually have a Colin in mind, but then I saw Harry in a film called The Devil All the Time, and he sings a song in it, and I knew that Colin was going to have to sing, but actually I then just went down a kind of Harry Melling wormhole, and in like everything he's in, he has this like incredible charisma, which I feel is like genuinely unique in that he's not in the roles I've seen anyway. He's not like an alpha male.
No.
He's often playing quite like peripheral, sort of set upon characters, but he's sort of like a kind of screen dom in a way, in that he like demands the attention of the audience even when he's being very passive. And I knew that Colin, who often in a scene is just like on the sideline, like holding Ray's cup, was going to have to command that attention. So he was my only choice for Colin, and so thank God he said yes. And then once we cast Colin, we moved on to Ray, and I remember speaking with Colleen Crawford and Lee and Emma, and being like, well, what's a kind of realistic world in which we can cast Ray? And they said, well, let's do a couple of unrealistic brainstorms, and then get back to reality once they say no. And Alex, kind of in a similar way to Harry, I think has a sort of like contradiction, maybe in a slightly inverse way, in that he like has all the trappings of like the world's biggest alpha male of all time, and yet he's sort of mischievous and playful, and Succession and Big Little Lies are two of my favourite TV shows.
Got a little vulnerability in there if you peck under it.
And you needed Ray to not just be a hunk, that you needed them to know that like whatever was lurking under the surface was interesting.
Yeah.
And so we sent the script to him, and he also said yes, and it was sort of crazy.
Wow. Yeah. Did he sort of work for scale, or sort of your budget in mind? You can't pay him what he earns on Succession, or I guess. Lee, you don't have to tell us his salary, but was he a team player?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And one thing I love is that and I don't hope this isn't too much of a spoil, we never really learn what's ticking inside Ray's head. We don't really know his backstory. We don't know his future. We don't even understand, like, does he have a day job? How did you and Alexander, though, talk about some of that? Like, what might have made him like this? Or did you want to keep that mysterious even with the actor?
We didn't talk about it, no.
Okay.
I never wanted to, I've never wanted to, like, know for sure what Ray's backstory is. I think, like, for me, the interest is in, like, wondering whether Ray is, like, the product of a kind of trauma response, or he's the product of someone who's just built his life around being, like, the world's best dom, and that might mean, like, withholding information over someone is a way of, like, dominating them, I think, because it, leaves them asking questions about you, and so, that was I never spoke about it at all. And I think Alex actually hasn't worked it out himself either.
Okay. But I think that's a really interesting way to work, because I think a lot of people would be like, oh, no, I need to know the backstory for when he was 6 years old to now. And they're like, no, great, mysterious.
I might just be lazy, but I never write backstories.
No. And Lee, does that make the production any different when you have somebody so recognizable, quite an A-list star, coming into a modest British debut film? Does that complicate? Did you have paparazzi? Does he demand a trailer or something? No.
No, I mean, as I discussed before, our kind of production methodology was all being in one base. Yeah. Alex had his room, Harry had his. They came in, they got made up. Funny enough, I was talking to Harry Melling about it yesterday, and he was just saying how much he enjoyed coming into the same place every day, that familiarity, and Alex did the same. He'd eat his omelette like Ray, and then
oh my God,
and then he would come to set.
Okay, wow. And can you tell us a little bit about the costumes? I mean, we've got everything from barbershop quartet to these leathers that aren't quite like Tom of Finland, though. It's not that. And he's wearing this sort of modern biking, I don't know what it's called, biking gear. Onesie, a little leather onesie with some yellow. And how did you want them to look?
I mean, Grace Snell, the costume designer, is a big part of this, but the key thing for me was that, like, I didn't want it to be Tom of Finland or in the, like, footprint of the kind of biker movies of the 60s and 70s. And so, like, Grace made me this, like, amazing document which was about, like, the way in which kind of contemporary biker looks have been fetishized in the gay community, and it was all much more, like, tight-fitting, one-piece leathers and like the use of color rather than black. And actually, the kind of cream one-piece, which is my fave.
Yeah. Do you have it?
No, I think production is probably cost an arm and a leg, so I haven't been given it. But
Sold it. Okay.
Lucy's got it.
Hey.
Yeah, private collection.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and being like, oh, I think it's going to be a little bit too white on camera. But Grace said, trust me, and I was right to, because it looks good.
Okay, it looks great. And how can we just talk about, this film does need to be, I mean, I think explicit is the wrong word, but it's kind of matter of fact with some of this sexuality, and I think that's really important. And how did you, this is going to sound creepy, what research did you do with that community? I mean, because you worked with an actual group of bikers who are into the dom world, right? Or some of it.
We worked with a group of bikers who are not like, they're from the they're from the GBMCC, which is like the UK's biggest gay motorbiking club, and sex isn't an explicit part of that, but obviously that maps onto like leather fetishes and things like that. So we then cast a bunch of bikers, and some of them did have real world experience. Like you said gimp mask earlier, and Paul the pup is going to be angry with you because it's a pup mask. And
sorry, Paul.
He's already written a letter to the Guardian this morning.
Oh my gosh! Okay, we all stand corrected about the pup mask.
But that's a kind of good example, actually, of like why they were so brilliant, because they lent like a detail and specificity to the scenes. Both the sex scenes and the biking scenes, which I think was like very key to me. I didn't want anyone from that community to look at those scenes and be like, they're using the wrong loop.
Yeah. Okay. Detailed research. Lee, what's it like having real bikers on a film set who might never have been on a film set before?
No, they were great.
Yeah.
They were all in. They came with their bikes. If you're hiring motorbikes, picture vehicles are expensive, so they were great for us.
Oh, great.
And the sequence at the end, where Colin's searching for Ray, we had a lot of bikes, and the GBMCC really helped us with all of that, and they were all in and just gave a lot of support. Yeah. And they were just excited to be there every day, which was great. When it's a novelty, they just... Yeah, they were great.
And Nick, when you're shooting some of those scenes that might be more sexual in nature, how do you try? I know there was an intimacy coordinator, but how do you, as DOP, try to make everybody feel sort of protected and maybe shooting it from an angle that's less intrusive? Or how did you approach that?
I think that's a really good question. I think that I would say 90% of any credit for that has to go to Robbie, the intimacy coordinator, because he created the most comfortable and amazing set to work with. And also, I've got to say, the actors and all of the bikers and pillions were just unbelievable. I mean, a lot of them are very comfortable in those environments anyway, but they were just hugely welcoming to each other and created a really, really positive space where it felt like we were... Sometimes it's difficult in that kind of material to feel like the camera is getting in the way, or creating an intrusion, when fundamentally we have to see it on camera in some way or another. So definitely between them, they created a really great space for that. In terms of the way we shoot them, I mean, I think what was really exciting was that quite often you do have to make contingencies in order to deal with people's concerns, etc. But we managed to shoot this incredible orgy wanna, which is one of the things I'm most proud of, with moving
that
motorbikes.
On the CV. Yes.
Right. Which is a huge thing to orchestrate and took a long time to plan. And it's only with Robbie and everyone being so on it that they managed to create a space where you can do something that expansive and have something that's safe and intimate at the same time.
And then Gareth, when you're editing some of those scenes, how, I guess sort of the pace of them, the cuts, how do you approach that? Because there's also a sort of wrestling scene that turns into an intimate scene, and assless sort of wrestling outfits I've never heard of before. But yeah, how do you edit those scenes?
I think something that we were always trying for, I think a really good example is the alleyway scene.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we always knew that Colin was comfortable and that he was okay with what was happening and that there wasn't a darkness there.
Yeah.
Because it could have been that alleyway could have been very dark and, you know, foreboding, and it could have gone very differently. But we were always making sure that you knew that Colin was 100% consensual the entire time.
Yeah, I was going to say, it didn't seem violent.
Yeah, and that was something that we really
forced.
Yeah, and that Ray, like for instance, in the wrestling sex scene, we wanted to make sure that we knew that Ray could see that he was in pain, and that's why he stopped.
Yeah.
You know, and all that kind of stuff. So that was something we always kept in mind.
Sort of keeping the emotional beats in there.
Yeah, exactly. The emotional beats within the explicitity.
Yeah. And did you have the luxury of rehearsal time? And how did you prepare with your cast, especially?
I did rehearsals with the bike gang other than Alex and Harry, because I wanted to kind of bond them. Some of them knew each other already, but a lot of them didn't. And so we spent a couple of days doing kind of intimacy workshops with Robbie, and then also just getting them comfortable in front of the camera, the people who hadn't been before. And then we did technical rehearsals for the wrestling, and I spent time with Harry, and I went to an Arcade Fire concert with Alex. That was the only prep we did. And
that sounds cool.
And
did he wear leather? No.
Not then.
He wore leather last night. I hope you've seen the red carpet photos.
He's been wearing leather all weekend.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It's quite hot out there for, need to go to a colder festival next. But yeah, in general, how do you like to prepare with actors? I mean, obviously you don't really like backstory, but are you doing sort of line reading? I mean, they never like when you give them a line reading, but are you going through the script line by line? Are you talking about bigger picture themes? How do you like to talk to them?
Yeah, I mean, probably bigger picture themes is, I do it early doors. So like, as soon as I cast Harry, I prepare this kind of like insufferable thing called a starter pack, which is like 20 pages of like ideas about Colin. So, you know, one thing which me and Harry spoke about, which was in that pack, was the idea that he's like stubbornly optimistic in all aspects of his life, and that was a way to like keep the lightness in the performance when he's kind of undergoing all sorts of experiences, and that will also include like film references and books to read and images which I think are useful. But yeah, it's
sort of onboarding.
Yeah. But then, you know, like I never speak about that once we're shooting, and I just, once we're shooting, I prefer like looking at the details of a scene, not from a psychological perspective, but from a sort of instinctual perspective.
Yeah. And how was it on set? Because, you know, maybe they can't get too buddy because Ray needs to remain a mystery? Or how did they work together? Or do they have different acting styles?
No, they're both actually, I mean, they were buddy, and they're both pretty similar in that, you know, they like, once the scene's over, they drop the character. You know, there's obvious exceptions to that when, you know, someone's doing a very emotional scene, but for the most part, it was like, they were super kind of in and out.
Yeah. Lee, sorry, I'm going to ask you the very boring producer question. Is the insurance tricky with the motorbikes and things like that?
I mean, we had a great stunt coordinator, Tony Lucken, who, you know, planned it. We storyboarded all of the motorbike sequences. Yeah. Not all of them ended up as we boarded them, but a large part of them did. So we did a lot of planning on that early, because the more you can plan with sort of less money is better. So we brought Tony on, and yeah, he managed to sort of work it in a very safe way. Okay.
But does it seriously, insurance? Do you know? No. Okay.
It's the same.
Any of my insurance friends in the room? No. And did Harry Melling know how to ride a bike, or did Alex? Do they both know how to ride?
Alex had a motorbiking license, but not. He hasn't biked. And Harry went and did I think it's called a CBT, which I also did.
Oh, did you? Wow.
But it was on a scooter, so it was a bit of a cop out. But yeah, we both did that, and I don't think learned very much from it. Okay. I found I was a pillion for quite a lot of the research.
I didn't know what the word meant. I Googled it the minute I saw the film, and it's the most brilliant title I think you could imagine. Can you tell everybody what a pillion is? or what the pillion?
Sure. Well, a pillion is like literally is the passenger seat on a bike, but...
Did you know this? No, I didn't know this, yes.
But yeah, it's also used as a like term for the passenger, and then in kind of queer biker culture, it's used as a submissive, like top-bottom biker pillion term.
Super cool.
Yeah.
What do you think, Harry, was the hardest scene to get right, either emotionally or logistically, just getting the camera in the right place or whatever?
What
Sorry,
was
I put you on the
hardest
spot.
scene?
What was your hardest scene down there, Nick?
That's a good question. I think the big old romp in the woods was probably
It's
the
quite
hardest.
complicated.
There's a lot of moving parts and
Quite literally, yeah.
in many ways, yeah. And we've got like a stunt rider riding a motorbike, intimacy all going on at the same time. We wanted it to be like a beautiful golden hour, and we'd shot. We had a whole bunch to shoot before that, and yeah, and I mean, interestingly, we kind of had a very distinct language that we wanted to shoot that with, and it came to very late in the day, a very beautiful time of day, but there's not much of it, and we had to like very quickly pivot how we wanted to do it, and shoot a lot of things backwards, shoot a lot of things in out of order, and also shoot a lot of it handheld, which we hadn't planned, but that in a way gave it like actually a much more visceral and like more I don't know, impactful in many ways. And also just meant that we could be much more reactive to them, and definitely a lot of my favourite shots in that scene were not what we planned. So I think that's an interesting moment when sometimes that
You have to roll with it,
the vibes kind of rule. Yeah.
And Gareth, I'm just wondering, these two amazing actors, and I think as the editor, you really, really are looking at their performances so much for months.
And their bodies.
Oh yes. Hey. Somebody just did a woo. What did you learn about these performances from watching this so closely and these actors?
I think something that we discovered, which was amazing, is that Harry Melling had all these sort of like isms that he did, and he always had these like little these little noises, like ooh and like yay, and we would kind of mine the footage for those moments, and it just made it that much funnier.
Really?
Like lovely, like all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then something that was great about Alex's performance is he plays someone who's very detached, which is tricky for an actor, right?
Yeah.
And so what we found as the shield starts to be worn down and after the funeral, there's moments where he starts to become a little bit more human, and we found those lovely little looks that he gives every once in a while that just shows that there's something behind the facade, and there's something there, and that was a testament to Alex, just having those moments that we could linger on.
I think as the audience, we really love those moments too, because it's otherwise some of his behavior is a bit unrelenting, as it has to be, and just to have a little flicker of
humanity.
He's a good guy, or not maybe a good. I don't know what kind of guy he is. He's a mystery, right? Harry, this is your first feature. What sort of surprised you about this journey of making this film? Do you think? Obviously, you've been waiting to make this. You were ready. But any surprises along the way?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest surprise was genuinely that I enjoyed it. I thought I was gonna. I mean, I love filmmaking, but I'd always found shorts like incredibly stressful. I mean, me and Nick have been making shorts for ages, and I used to like hate the shoot, and I really loved the shoot, and that's probably because when you're making shorts, even though I had a great team around me, you're kind of doing, you're sort of the location manager and the XY and the director. And I was the unit driver as well, and like the wheel of the car fell off as I was driving. It's not a relevant story to now, but the point is I enjoyed it. I liked it.
From that.
Yeah. I really loved the shoot, and it made me. I hadn't directed anything for 7 years, so I remembered that I like directing.
That's good. But yeah, if you could talk through the development and the writing, and then the shoot, and then the post-production, did you sort of find parts of all of that you loved, or is there any part of that you were just like, oh, I have to get through this part to do that part?
I think I found there's like definitely parts of each. It sort of slightly depends on my perspective on how the thing is at that stage. So like in the script, I find that like whenever I hand in a draft, I have 24 hours of like elation, and then suddenly I hate it again. And then the shoot was nice, and then the edit was kind of similar to the script, where like I remember handing in the first director's cut and thinking that like Lee and Emma were just gonna be like, "You've done it," and
well done, like, we're done.
Yeah, 9 months later we picture locked. But yeah, it's sort of, I think I have quite a topsy-turvy relationship to what I'm doing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more before we open it up, and to be thinking of some great questions. This one's for Lee, because I've spoken to you about Bird, which is an amazing film, but every film is different. And I'm wondering, for you as a producer, you know, what do you think you learned on this? And could you learn something from working with a company like Element, who's, you know, making amazing work? And yeah, what did you think you learned as a producer on this film?
I mean, I was the kind of elder statesman in this, so these are kind of generation of filmmaker below me, and they're just enthusiasm, and there was never a problem too big. And what was great about this whole crew is that, you know, there were times when money was challenging, but we'd all be in a huddle kind of figuring out a way to make it work. You know, for example, Nick got some camera systems that, you know, that came in as a substitute for track, and all that stuff just looks, you know, totally great. And a couple of compromises on locations, or we thought we were making compromises, but actually they've ended up really great. So it was nice to sort of get back into something where the challenges of the budget were, you know, the problem solving was great with this team, because we were all, you know, in it together and making those problems go away creatively.
Any advice for, there's plenty of UK filmmakers in this room, about sort of those location challenges and all that? I mean, it can be quite tough sometimes, I guess, but how do you, and especially if a location falls through, how do you adapt? Or is it just so specific of...
I just think London's so prohibitive at the moment. It's so expensive. So London was always going to be a challenge for us, but... Film Fixer, who we worked with in Bromley, were great. Did we have any locations fall through? Yeah, we did. Ray's House. Ray's House was the big one. So we had to adapt there. But we had a great locations team as well. We had really, I mean, for the budget level we worked with, we had an incredible team, actually.
Great. Okay, we've got a question at the... Oh, there. Right.
Hi. I was wondering, you were just saying that you've done short films together for quite some time. You said you didn't enjoy it, but looking back, do you think it's really helped you for this film, or like what were the things that? Yeah,
massively. And I mean, I did like, I loved making the short films. By the end of it, it just was the shoot I found very like stressful. But I think like I learned everything making shorts. I didn't go to film school, so it was like very much my stomping ground. But I mean, when me and Nick first made a film, I remember like, before the first scene, going up to the first AD, who I probably called the producer, and being like how do you do the like action bit? And so I've learned everything from doing shorts, and whether that's like doing them on an iPhone or doing them on a proper camera. And it, you know, I also, obviously mine and Nick's working relationship has developed across however many shorts we've made, and I think that making a feature was intimidating, and so having like at least one person who I knew very well and knew the working process very well was like a real reassurance.
Yeah. Nick, what kind of cameras did you use, by the way, and lenses, if anybody's a camera geek?
We used primarily the Alexa 35 with Canon K35 lenses, but as Lee was saying, we had a few odds and ends where like the intention, the dream was to like lay 300 feet of track and like track alongside them for forever, and on the tech recce everyone was like, not gonna happen, because they need 3 hours to lay it and so on. So then we used a DJI Ronin 4D, which is like an independent camera. It's like self-stabilizing, recently made famous by adolescents, for anyone who's been watching that. Yeah. And so we used that for a lot of those long tracking shots, and it was really, really great for him. And we also used a red Komodo for a couple of like rigging shots and other bits and bobs, and used that with a little tiny prosumer gimbal that I've seen many of them up and down this boulevard. We actually shot the wrestling scene with that. we're trying to work out our resources and like for what we could get for a day of Steadicam or what we could get for however many extra grips we need to run for all this track. There were these couple of little toys effectively that meant that we could work in a quicker and more fluid way.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm sure there's some camera people here who understood all that. Do you have a question right in the front row? And then we'll go, was that a question? Yeah, it is a question, not just a scratching of the head.
This is to Harry, writing-wise. I'm an actress in London, but I'm also writing a feature at the moment, and I am in touch with the author. But because it's based on a true story, every time I'm about to start writing it, I'm so nervous. What if it's not perfect enough? What if I'm not saying the story that's truth to that person? When you're writing, do you write like chronologically, your favorite scene first, or the biggest scene first? Like, how is your approach on that?
I think my approach is probably like not a good model for anyone, but like, I mean, PILLION, for instance, was like, my approach was like, write a version on a cruise ship, write a version in ancient Rome, like I wrote like 4 drafts in like wildly different time periods and places, but it tends to be just like start until I get stuck, and then over the course of that process discover certain scenes which I think will like last the distance, and like whittle it down in a kind of long-winded way across that process. I remember hearing like Celine Sciamma, I'm going to say, talk about how she just does a list of scenes, and then once she's got a full list of scenes she's happy with, that's the script. And I think like that sounds like a great idea. I might try that out next time.
So you actually did have a version in ancient Rome?
Yeah, it was terrible.
Okay. PILLION 2, The Revenge. There was a question in the back by the door.
I was just going to ask the exact same question to Gareth. Like, what was your process in piecing all the scenes together as they came in? Did you do any editing on set? How was kind of the storytelling process for that like?
I did a cut every single day that I would send to Harry.
Wow.
And we would have a discussion either every day or every morning and stuff like that on the way to set, and just kind of discuss how things were coming together. And then and then I put the assembly together, and then we watched it when he came in. So it was just very much like having an ongoing conversation as the shoot was happening. I never went to set, and I actually don't like going to set because I find I'm the first viewer of the footage. And for instance, if the shots, the scenes in here, and I don't understand where that door is, I need to understand that. And if I've been to set, I'll know. So I need to be really, really objective. So I try to, and also like, you're just in the way, right? So I just try to stay as far away as I can.
Oh, yeah. Are you willing to share anything that was tricky in the edit, or some kind of problem you think that you had to go back to or refine? I mean, for any of you that are comfortable talking about that.
The big dinner scene was the one.
With Mom and Dad.
Yeah, that was the one that went through iteration after iteration after iteration. I think the original assembly was 8 minutes long. And it was great. I mean, it was always a good. I think this is
always good. That's tough.
Well, this is the thing about the whole film. It was always good. There were never problems, and so it was always just about making the film better, which is an amazing place to start. And can I talk about the thing that we kind of?
Yeah, sure.
So basically, right at the end of the dinner scene, as scripted, Peggy has this massive cancerous pang that she had, and she's having this like huge cough, and then it becomes really sad. And then she looks at Ray and says, "What are you still doing here?" Ray leaves. Colin follows him, and then that was the scene. And then we actually cut immediately to the funeral. Okay. What ended up being is that she says, he's going out with a creep. Our son is with a creep. And she looks at Colin. Colin leaves, and then Ray follows him, which completely changes the dynamic of everything.
Yeah.
So so stuff like that it was just working through it and working through it. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Thank you. Any more questions in the room, or I can? Yes, here on the corner. Katie's coming with the mic.
Hi. So Gareth, Harry, sorry, you said you had the director's cut ready, and then 9 months later, Gareth changed it. How did that feel for you? Did it feel like the film changed from what you wanted it to be?
Oh no, but you were in those 9 months every day.
Yeah, I was. Yeah. When I said, me and Gareth did the director's cut together, and then
spent the next 9 months
I
together.
thought it was great until Lee told me it wasn't great, and then me and Gareth spent another 9 months until Lee said it was good.
Yeah, this is very much your vision. Nobody else has final cut. Yeah, right.
Well, kind of.
Okay.
Can I just say something, actually? Something that was wonderful for me, and this is Lee facilitating. You know, he said he facilitated a lot on set, but what Lee and Emma did was give us time in the edit. And it's to have time in the edit is so precious because you're only going to make it better. And we always had the time to make it better, and it was amazing that you guys gave us that time.
One more out there. Yes, we've got one over here. Sorry, Katie's running around.
Hi, this is a question for Harry. Going from like shorts where it might be a 3 or 4 day shoot to, I think this is 28 days. How did you actually keep your like energies level up? Were there any like moments where there's dips? And as you mentioned, when you're an independent filmmaker, sometimes you're doing more than the one job on a short. So maybe there was more reserve energy because you had a bigger crew. But yeah, just be good to hear how you do the marathon. Basically, that's a feature.
I remember like starting out promisingly in terms of being like, you know, I gave up drinking a month before, I gave up smoking a month before, and was like, you know, gave up socializing 2 years before, and then like a week into the shoot, I was like back smoking 20 a day, and like, but I think that actually like it definitely was tiring, but part of the exhaustion of making any film for me, whether it's like 4 days or 28 days, is just the like anxieties about it, whether, you know, what shit's going to go wrong or whatever, and you know, you definitely do just get into like a rhythm of doing like a 5 day week, and it flew by. I remember like not feeling that tired at the end, probably feeling more tired after the shorts actually.
Was there ever a point when you were shooting that you were like, I got this, like, or does the anxiety come to the wrap party? You know, is it?
I mean, no. I was like oddly overconfident.
That's good.
Gareth would send me the like assemblies of the scenes, and like I won't be next time because some of the scenes didn't end up working. But I do remember being like, every scene is going quite well, and then like it was. I don't know. I think you can get like slightly clouded in your sense of what you're shooting a little bit when you're shooting. But in terms of I got this, there was. I mean, I knew, for instance, when I saw the assembly of the dinner scene, I was like, I don't have that, and so I knew there was some problems. But I do remember like thinking in kind of week 2. I can direct this.
Okay. Hey, you can direct it. Yes, you did it. I'm curious what it's like to get the call that you've gotten into Cannes after these years of work. How does that feel? Do you scream? Do you cry? Do you punch the wall?
I was with Nick in a grade and Emma, and you get a like kind of very formal email, and I like got heart palpitations, and then like I didn't tell Emma for like 3 minutes because I was like, my heart needs to stop pounding, and then obviously like I told her, and then we all went kind of nuts.
Yeah, as you do. Speaking of nuts, absolutely brought down the house last night at your premiere here. I mean, it really did. I've heard from people who were in that room. How does that feel? You had the bikers there. You have Skarsgård in his leathers. Like, what is that moment like? Is it overwhelming?
Like, very overwhelming, yeah. I mean, it's like nothing I've ever experienced before in my life, and probably will never experience again. It was like, it was overwhelming, but it was lovely because there was, you know, so many people who, and I think this is a kind of credit to how invested the people working in it were. So many people from the crew had like made the pretty expensive trip to Cannes, and were in the cinema, and you know the bikers were there, and so it was just like a a crazy, crazy high. Although it does get like a bit, I mean, it sounds like a arrogant thing to say, but like you also feel quite awkward.
It is awkward. They've got a camera
like,
on your face while this ovation is going on.
And I like that.
It's
I
like,
was
thank you,
in between Alex and Harry, and at one point they were both like speaking to the people on the other side of them, and I was just like in the middle, like waiting for people.
Well, get used to the standing ovations. Congrats on Pillion. Thank you for coming here to tell us how you made it. It's really continued success we wish you with this film. It's special.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.